Hello, students. This is Economics Unit 3, Lesson 2, and this is on the income gap. So today we want to understand what we're talking about when we say the income gap. You should have at this point watched a video that discusses this graph, but what we need to understand is this top level, the actual distribution of wealth. You know, the top 20% holds more than 80% of the wealth. So there's definitely an income gap in America. There's a big difference between the richest person and the poorest person. That's what an income gap is. It's simply the difference between rich and poor in a country. And as you learned from the video, America's income gap is pretty significant. We definitely have something. Now, why, you ask? Why do we have this severe income gap? Well, people are going to answer that in different ways, but most Americans would argue or would understand that it's because we have profit motive. Okay, why is there such a person as Bill Gates in America? Why is there an Oprah in America? The answer is because they had an opportunity to make money. They had a profit motive, they had an opportunity for wealth creation, and they took it. Now, as we talk about poverty, it's really important to understand the differences between a couple of terms. So let's start with absolute. Absolute poverty, I think we've mentioned this in class before. It's a worldwide level of poverty. It's a number that was put into place by the World Bank to express severe poverty. But then you have relative poverty. And relative poverty are people who are poor compared to other people in that country. So if we're talking about relative poverty, then I could argue that I'm poor. Why? Because I'm poorer than Bill Gates. So I'm relatively poor. But am I actually poor? Am I absolute poverty? No, I'm not even close to absolute poverty. I live a middle class life, right? So it's just this difference between these words. Like here's an example. In the United States, for a family of four, $25,000 a year is the poverty line. That means if you're below that number, you're considered significantly poor, okay? If you look at that number, that makes sense. I mean, housing is real expensive. I mean, a family of four to live on $25,000 would be really hard. But we have to remember that in the U.S., they also get tuition-free education, public education, and they also get government-paid health care, Medicaid. If you are impoverished in the United States, you get Medicaid. Now, that's relative poverty, okay? But according to the World Bank, extreme poverty is less than $1,000 annually. So, look at those numbers. $25,000, you and I might see that number and be like, oh, yeah, that's really poor, man, that's tough. And it is. I mean, it's relatively poor for the United States. But we've got to keep poverty we've got to understand the difference between them, okay? Absolute poverty is a different level of poverty. It's a different type of thing. It's not just relative to the country. So how should we think about poverty and the income gap? How should we process this? Well, obviously, I cannot tell you how to process it. I'm just going to give you some viewpoints. So the first one is this. Some people look at these two pictures on the screen, the beautiful, gigantic mansion with the pool and the trailer home. And some people believe that that is unfair. Like it's morally wrong. It's absolutely wrong that one person would live in a trailer and another would live in a mansion. Now, the people who would argue this would say, look, it's morally wrong that there's this huge difference, this disparity in living. And because it's morally wrong, the government has to act. They have to step in and redistribute wealth. So that means they want to tax the wealth at a much higher rate. So basically, taking money, not stealing money. I don't want you to think of like a Robin Hood deal. It's not like that. But it's taking more money from the wealthy and then distributing that money among the poor. Okay, that's the first viewpoint. Viewpoint two is a little bit stronger, kind of, than that. Viewpoint two just says it's part of the world. It can't be helped. You can't do anything about it. Even if you tried to redistribute wealth, there would still be somebody who has more than someone else. So viewpoint two is like a very practical, very like real life kind of argument that you just can't do anything about it. Usually viewpoint two people also argue that like if you don't like the way your life is, just work hard and don't let it be that way anymore. Get out of poverty. Start a business, get a job. So that's viewpoint two. It's kind of this viewpoint. Another kind of argument that comes from that group of people is arguing, look, don't be mad that other people are richer than you. If you're mad that other people are richer than you, you're just whining. Okay, you're just baby whining. And so don't like these are very real viewpoints. I mean, we hear these in the political sphere all the time. Now, there's a third viewpoint, which is really kind of more of a moderate viewpoint, sort of the middle ground. And the third viewpoint says, look, income inequality is not a big problem because it's just saying that some people had an opportunity to create wealth. So like, good for Oprah. She created wealth. That's not a problem. Good for her. Maybe I can create wealth too. The bigger issue, viewpoint three, focuses on opportunity. It's not about whether or not somebody has more money than me. It's about opportunity. Does every person have an opportunity to get out of where they are? Do they get the education? Do they have the institutions in place, the rule of law, the property rights in place that they can rise from the poverty they're in? When it comes to free markets or capitalism and inequality, countries with capitalist economies tend to have more extreme inequality. Command economies, economies controlled by the government, tend to be much more equal, but also poorer. Okay, so the more unfree, the less unequal, but also the poorer. So, what is capitalism? I'll let you just read this for a minute. But what is the result of capitalism? The result is wealth. Yes, generally speaking, countries that are capital are significantly more wealthy than other countries. But capitalism also has wealth inequality because as the rich get richer, the poor get richer too, but they get rich slower. So, what should you think about capitalism? I mean, in some circles of America, capitalism is like a bad word. Look at the little caption here: capitalism creating poverty and inequality since 1776. So should you think about it like that, or what about the people who are ironic about capitalism and they're like, oh look, this multi-million-dollar filmmaker is saying capitalism is evil, but he's actually living off of capitalism. So should you think like this? Should you think like that? Well, do the poor get poorer and the rich get richer in capitalism? Because that's often the argument. And here's the answer. If you look at the data, and we will do this in the next class period, generally speaking, as the economy grows, the rich do get richer and the poor get richer. So generally speaking, as the economy grows, everyone does better. But the richer get richer faster. Okay, do you get that statement? As the economy grows, the rich get richer and the poor get richer, but the rich get richer faster. In other words, there's a higher rate of growth. Okay, so that's kind of where we're going to stop today. Just thinking about inequality. I've got some graphs that I want you to look at as well.